Hey students, Mr. Zacek here. Welcome to Unit 2, Lesson 4. We're going to do segment addition and postulate proofs and segment and angle addition postulate proofs. And we're going to do these with a shortcut from the way we did them in the last lesson. I'm going to show you kind of a simpler way to do it. The other ones are a little more technically correct, but this shortcut will work, and it makes a little more, kind of sense to people. So here's where we're going. We're going from a small to a larger segment. So we're going to be adding something. So let's start by marking what we're given. We're given that AB is equal to XY. So I'm just going to mark that with some tick marks. And we're given that BC is equal to YZ. Okay? And we're trying to prove that AC, which is this larger segment, is equal to XC. So it's really simple. We're just going to add those two together. So here's how we can do that with a little bit of a shortcut from what we did in the last lesson. So we've got AB equals XY, BC equals YZ. That is given. And we're simply going to add these together. AB plus BC equals XY plus YZ, or what's the result? When you add AB and BC, the result is AC equals XZ. And what did we do? We added two things together. Those were the two things in step one, and that is the addition property of equality. So in last lesson we did the segment addition postulate, and then we did the substitution, and what we're saying here today is we don't have to do that every time. Although it's right to do it that way, it's correct, this is another avenue. It's a little bit of a shortcut. Okay, so in number 2 we've got, sorry for not putting the points here on these, we're given that AB is equal to CD. And what we're trying to prove here is we're trying to prove that this segment AC is equal to BD. And what we want to notice here is that the piece that needs to be added to both of those is BC. So that's one of our freebies that we can get. So we'll go AB equals CD. Okay, that's given. Now what we need to do is, in step 2, we need to say that BC equals BC. And the reason for this is the reflexive property. So the first one was given. The reflexive property is something we see from the diagram, so we call these freebies. You don't have to write freebie there when you do an actual proof, but that's just a term that we use to help you know that it didn't have to be a given thing. We can just get it from the diagram. And so now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do AB plus BC equals CD plus BC, or the result, which is AC equals BD. And again, that's the addition property of equality. If you add two things that are equal, the sum is equal. And so the two things were step 1 and step 2. We added them together. And again, a little bit of a shortcut. As opposed to using segment addition postulate and substitution, we can just write them this way. All right, so now on the back of this page, we're going to go from large to small segments. And so I'm going to mark these points. If you're kind of following this thought process, you're gonna, let's start with what we're marking. So we know that AC is equal to XZ. That's what we're given. Okay, so those big ones, those are congruent. And then we know that AB is equal to XY. Okay, and we're trying to find BC equals YZ. So very similar. But instead of adding, for this one, we're going to subtract, which you may have already made that assumption, and if you did, you were correct. So we have our givens, and now we just do AC minus AB equals XZ minus XY, and we write our OR statement. The result of AC minus AB is BC. BC equals XZ minus XY is YZ, and instead of the addition property, this is the subtraction property of equality. Okay, number 4 is going to be very similar again here. This time, let's put some dots on here. So we're given now AC is equal to BD. So that's our given. So those are, we know those. And we're trying to get down to prove our smaller sides. Well, we still have that same reflexive property, and this time we're just going to subtract it. So AC equals BD. That's our given. And then we're going to say for our freebie, BC equals BC. Reflexive property. Think about looking in the mirror, we see the same thing. And now, step 3, we're going to subtract. So AC minus BC equals BD minus BC, or what's the result? Let's give you a little image here. The result is AB is going to be the same as CD. So, or AB equals CD, which is the subtraction property of equality. So, you know, if you struggle with thinking about that, put some numbers in there. Say this is 10 and 10 and 6. Well, we know that 10 minus 6 equals 10 minus 6, or 4 equals 4. Okay, so that's kind of, you know, if you're having a hard time visualizing it, put some numbers in there. That often helps with getting the visual. All right, let's roll along. We're going to do essentially the same thing here with angles. So we're given that DEG, that would be this angle here, equals the measure of angle LMP, that's this angle. And then we're given that GEF, I'm going to use 2 tick marks on that one, equals the measure of angle PMN. Okay, and then we're trying to prove the larger markings here. Sometimes when I use my highlighter on there, I have to be careful. It makes a segment. So where are we going? Small to large. We're going to use the addition property. So let's go ahead and start with our givens. The measure of angle DEG equals the measure of angle LMP. The measure of angle GEF equals the measure of angle PMN. Given. And now we're simply going to add those together. So we say measure of angle DEG plus the measure of angle GEF equals the measure of angle LMP plus the measure of angle PMN. Should have wrote a little smaller. Or what's the result? That's our green angle up there. The measure of angle DEF equals the measure of angle LMN. And we added 2 things together that were equal, which is the addition property of equality. So some of you, you've got it now. You probably can just kind of roll and get the other ones, but I'm here to help, so we'll do them together. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I got something in my nose here. So now we've got the measure of angle ABD, that's this angle here, equals the measure of EBC, that's this angle, and we're trying to prove the measure of ABE. That would be, let me mark it a little bit of a different way just to help make you see it. We're trying to get this angle, ABE, equal to DBC. And so just like we use the reflexive property, we're going to use the reflexive property here to get our second angle to add to that. So let's start with our given. The measure of angle ABD equals the measure of angle EBC. That's given. Okay, now we have to get a second angle to add, and that's the measure of angle DBE equals the measure of angle DBE. That's a freebie. The reflexive property. And so we're going to go ahead and add those two things together. So the measure of angle ABD plus the measure of angle DBE, right smaller, measure of angle EBC plus the measure of angle DBE, or the result of that is the thing we're trying to prove, which is the measure of angle ABE equal to the measure of angle DBC. All right, and again, that is the addition property of equality. My football coach used to say repetition is the mother of learning. So this lesson has a lot of kind of repetition in it. All right, now we're going large to small, so we're going to think subtraction. Okay, so given angle DEF, all right, let's mark that on here. I'm going to use a highlighter because that's a bigger one. So DEF, that's the big one, and LMN. Okay, given those two angles are congruent, and GEF, that would be this angle here and this angle, we're trying to prove that those two remaining angles are congruent. So we're going to use subtraction. So the measure of angle DEF equals the measure of angle LMN. The measure of angle GEF equals the measure of angle PMN. All right, and that is given. And so we're just going to subtract. Measure of angle DEF minus measure of angle GEF. That looks like a plus sign, doesn't it? Let's correct that. Okay. Minus equals the measure of angle LMN minus measure of angle PMN, or we got to write the or. The result would be the measure of angle DEG equals the measure of angle LMP, and that is the subtraction property of equality. All right, what I would like you to do is I'd like you to finish the last one. I think you can follow along with it. If you've guessed correctly, you're going to need to do the reflexive property in step 2 and then do the subtraction property. But hopefully that just gives you some practice here in doing these things, and as you go through it, if it's catching on, that's wonderful. And if you need a little more clarity with it, you want to sit down with me in class and talk about really identifying these things, or any questions that you have, please go ahead and do that. All right, because learning is all about asking, not knowing. All right, thanks. Good luck.